What are some of the weirdest crimes? From an heiress who had literally no reason to scam to some weird guy licking sushi plates. You'll be asking yourself, but why? Let's get started with number 6, the accused heiress. Australian lawyer Ashlyn Nassif allegedly falsified a $150 million construction contract for a property development. Ashlyn's the daughter of high-profile Australian property developer Jean Nassif, who was known for his extravagant displays of wealth. Ashlyn had her own law practice called EA Legal and began her career as a property developer with her father's company. The firm is described as a multidisciplinary law firm specializing in property, planning, construction, commercial, and estate law. On the firm's website, Ashlyn described herself as a key player of one of Australia's most prominent property development companies and also listed that she frequently worked with developers and private investors. Throughout her career, she earned the trust and respect of many established companies and individuals as she was well respected for her ability to help people through complex real estate actions, financing and commercial actions, and property developments. So the point is, she's doing pretty well. Despite her father's fortune, Ashlyn wanted more. So she submitted fake contracts to Westpac Bank to meet a $10.5 million pre-sale condition for the Skyview Apartments in Castle Hill, Sydney. These contracts were reportedly used to secure the loan for her father's development company, Toplace, which was constructing the Skyview Towers, consisting of approximately 960 apartments. Ashlyn's fraudulent activities occurred over a 3-month period in late 2021, when her actions caught the attention of authorities. The authorities didn't agree with Ashlyn's plan, so they conducted an investigation into her operation. They raided 4 properties associated with Ashlyn, including her law firm, EA Legal. Authorities also searched Jean Nassif's home and office. After the raids, authorities took Ashlyn in for questioning, where they spent hours trying to get to the bottom of what she'd done. She was later charged. Ashlyn's father, Jean, posted a supportive message to her on Instagram, along with a video of a child playing on a beach. In his message, he told her to remember that he loves her and that she needs to believe in herself as much as he believes in her. But the video wasn't created by Jean, and the child wasn't his daughter, so there's that. He also stated he would always support her and that he may not be around for the rest of her life, but he would always love her for the rest of his life. That's really nice, but geez, Jean, she's not looking at life in prison or something. Ashlyn later appeared in court where she seemed disheveled while facing her fraud charges. During her initial hearing, Ashlyn's lawyer clarified that his client didn't receive any financial benefit from the alleged fraud. Additionally, he emphasized that she didn't have a criminal record, was of good character, and was a lawyer of the Supreme Court of New South Wales. Although prosecutors didn't oppose releasing her on bail, the magistrate ordered strict conditions to mitigate concerns she could fail to show at court or interfere with witnesses. The magistrate forced her to surrender her passport, pay $2.6 million in bail, and banned her from contacting 24 people, including her father. Additionally, she has to live with her mother, report to her local police station every day between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and follow a 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew. Number 5. Public lickings. Conveyor belt sushi restaurants in Japan faced a PR crisis after videos of a customer licking sushi and utensils went viral. A series of videos emerged showing a young man engaging in unsanitary behavior at a popular sushi restaurant. The Japanese public watched the videos in outrage, where the customer licked the rim of a teacup and soy sauce bottles and smeared his saliva on sushi pieces circulating on the conveyor belt. Conveyor belt sushi restaurants opened in Japan in the late 1950s and have been a popular sushi service ever since. They work by placing sushi on a rotating conveyor belt that passes diners. Customers can select the dishes they desire as they pass by, choosing from various options. These restaurants offer a more affordable and casual dining experience than traditional establishments, as they eliminate the need to order directly from a sushi chef. After the original viral videos, copycats visited other conveyor belt restaurants and engaged in the same gross behavior. 3 individuals who were caught drinking soy sauce directly from a communal cup were arrested in connection with the pranks. In response to the incidents, the Akindo Sushiro Company, which operates the restaurant featured in one of the videos, took measures to address the damage caused. They replaced soy sauce bottles, sanitized cups, and centralized utensils and tableware. The company also filed a complaint for damages with the police and received a direct apology from the individual responsible for the video. Additionally, the restaurant chain Kura Sushi, affected by the pranks, expressed their commitment to protecting the conveyor belt sushi model. They installed AI-equipped cameras to detect suspicious behavior behavior, such as putting plates back and implemented measures to report malicious behavior to the police. The company hopes the recent arrests will discourage copycat incidents and end the viral trend. Another restaurant, Kosimaru, decided to phase out its conveyor belt system to avoid any other pranks. They also plan to transition to a touch panel ordering system, likely as a response to the incidents and to enhance hygiene and customer safety. One of the individuals involved in the incidents at a Kura Sushi location, Yoshino Ryoga, apologized for his behavior. He acknowledged his wrongdoing and his actions' impact on the conveyor belt sushi industry. They arrested the kids drinking soy sauce as if drinking straight wasn't punishment enough. They need to get someone's old-fashioned strict grandfather in there. You think it's funny to drink soy sauce? Drink all of it then! Number 4. Doppelganger Danger. A German woman, who's only identified as Sharaban K, allegedly took the life of a lookalike she found on Instagram in an elaborate attempt to disappear from her own in late 2022. She had met a girl only identified as Khadija O on Instagram, and with the help of her boyfriend, Sharaban lured her doppelganger into a forest when the crime occurred. They then abandoned Khadija's remains in the backseat of Sharaban's car. When authorities found Khadija, what they found was unrecognizable, and investigators believed Sharaban had fallen victim to the heinous crime. It wasn't until an autopsy report revealed that the victim was actually Khadija that law enforcement learned the truth and opened an in-depth investigation into the case. Sharaban had actively sought out women on Instagram who looked like her and contacted several potential victims before selecting beauty blogger Khadija. Khadija loved to share content of herself, trying out new products and giving her followers beauty tips. When Sharaban reached out to her, she thought it was the start of a new business deal. Sharaban enticed the beauty blogger by sending her messages about cosmetics and asking to meet up so she could give her some beauty product. Two women arranged to meet so that Sharaban could give Khadija the cosmetics. Sharaban told her parents she was going to visit her ex-husband in Munich, but she drove to Khadija's place to pick her up instead. The two then drove into a secluded wooded area where Sharaban horrifically ended Khadija's life. After the crime, Sharaban and her boyfriend left her Mercedes somewhere passers-by could easily find it, leaving Khadija's remains in the back seat. Khadija was left so unrecognizable that it made it difficult for authorities to identify her, allowing them to mistake her for Sharaban. So why did Sharaban want to disappear? Investigators uncovered more information about Sharaban's motives. She had internal disputes with her family and wanted to go into hiding, and faking her demise meant she could escape her problems. Sharaban now faces charges for her crimes, and Shakir has been charged as an accomplice. Sharaban could face life imprisonment if she's found guilty. Just running away would have been a better solution, right? Number 3. Ostrich Chicks. Thieves stole a flock of ostrich chicks from a hatchery at Hastings Ostrich Farms during the early morning hours in Victoria, Australia. Farm owner Michael Hastings awoke to find that he was missing 20 chicks, and the thieves' motive was unknown. Hastings feared that the thieves wouldn't know how to care for the young birds, who were only 2 weeks old. Birds that young require constant care and are very vulnerable to illness and mishandling, as each of them only weigh around 3.3 pounds on average each. Baby ostriches require specific care to ensure healthy development. They need a warm and controlled environment, a specialized diet consisting of high-quality ostrich or a specially formulated starter feed, hydration, socialization, and veterinary care. The stolen chicks held a significant monetary value, with the entire flock being valued at $10,000, and some individual birds worth up to $1,000 each. Hastings Ostrich Farms wasn't just known for its birds and for producing eggs, meat, and various products from ostrich leather. They also played a crucial role in supplying ostrich chicks to hobby farms nationwide. Wait, was that the classic get os rich quick scheme? Number 2. The lion statue. A scammer convinced an unnamed elderly widower from Oregon to spend his entire life savings on a statue of a lion. The con artist met the widower through an online dating service, and the pair quickly began a long-distance romance. While the widower thought he was falling in love with a woman that loved him back, he was talking to someone that had stolen a woman's identity. Only the scammer gained the man's trust. He convinced him to invest in a Florida art gallery. The scammer claimed that the investment would help raise $5 million to ship a large marble lion sculpture from Wuhan, China. The fraudster promised the widower a high return on investment and profits from the statue's eventual sale. Any concerns the widower had were put to rest by the fraudster's thorough planning. To seem legitimate, the scammer provided fake bank statements and documents outlined the contract with the museum. Over 5 months, the widower made several payments totaling $200,000, which were his whole life savings. Once the entire balance had been transferred, the scammer vanished. Turns out, the marble lion was actually a well-known 47 7.5-foot long wooden sculpture located in a square in Wuhan, and there were never intentions to ship it. Victims of scams of this nature often wire funds overseas or to third-party transfer agents, making it very difficult to track down the money and identify the con artist. Unfortunately, this means that the widower is unlikely to ever recover his life savings. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned for our past release about this guy's strange reason to play an international spy. Number 1. The Promise. Rachel Camille Calhoun used the promise of doing certain special personal favors to carry out a bank robbery in Forestdale, Alabama. The incident unfolded at Regions Bank branch on Tomahawk Road in Forestdale. Shortly before 10 a.m. on Wednesday, Calhoun reportedly entered the bank and handed the manager a carefully crafted note. The contents of the note revealed a shocking strategy. Calhoun demanded a sum of $6,000 from the bank's vault, offering an intimate favor as a reward if the manager complied. However, she threatened to accuse the manager of sexual assault if he refused. Authorities swiftly responded to a report of the attempted robbery, with law enforcement quickly arriving at the scene. Deputies discovered Calhoun still inside the bank and promptly apprehended her, thwarting the crime and saving the employees. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office continuing its investigation into the incident, aiming to gather additional evidence and gain further insights into the motives and intentions of the suspect. Authorities and the public were puzzled by Calhoun's approach, simply because who proposes this in a bank robbery? Calhoun was held in custody and formally charged. Robert Freegard already had a long history of spreading lies before working as a bartender at a British pub in the early 1990s. There, he crossed paths with a trio of students from nearby Harper Adams Agricultural College. Going by the name Rob, he sparked a friendship with Maria, Sarah, and John, who were from privileged backgrounds and looking for a bit of adventure in their lives. They seemed to find what they were looking for as they learned more about the friendly and mysterious bartender. Rob started dating Maria, and he soon became friendly with John. After building their trust for some time, he shared a big secret, and they promised not to tell anyone about it. He said he wasn't a bartender at all, but was working undercover as an MI5 agent. For those unfamiliar with the secretive United Kingdom agency, it serves roughly the same function as the FBI in America. According to Rob, he was sent to the area to investigate terrorist plots by Irish Republican Army. Members of the notorious militia, he said, were behind multiple deaths, including the death of John's college buddy, which had been staged to look like an accident. In retrospect, it's easy to lay out the intricately woven lies and misrepresentations that Rob made about himself. As for his actual identity, however, it's not always so easy to suss out the truth. He was born in 1971 and hailed from Derbyshire, where his single mother raised him and his sister. They moved around a lot during his formative years, and those who knew him as a student described him as mostly quiet, introverted kid. Of course, he always seemed to find some joy in pulling pranks on his classmates, which paved the way for the scams and schemes he hatched later on in life. By the time he was 14, Rob had dropped out of school and spent the next few years forming the basis for a life built on lies and deception. When his teenage years ended, he was already leaving victims in his wake. He struck up a relationship with a teacher several years older than him. He began scamming her out of her money after convincing her that he was independently wealthy as a young man. The teacher, Allison Hopkins, tried to break things off when she found out that he had fraudulently used her credit card and accessed her bank account to pad his own pockets. This was all after Allison agreed to extend a personal loan for £1,500 that he had no intention of ever repaying. When Allison told Rob she wanted to end their relationship, he became outraged, and she feared for her own safety. Things got so bad that she relocated to a town more than 200 miles away. Even that wasn't enough to stop him, though. He soon tracked her down and broke into her home to kidnap her. Fortunately for Allison, he failed. Rob's ex shared the frightening story with her friends, who then told the local police. As Rob faced criminal charges in early 1993, he found an opportunity to leave the area and set off on a life on the run from the law. His lies varied from victim to victim, but one type of scam seemed to be a recurring theme throughout this period of his life. Rob focused on finding women who would fall for his charm long enough for him to cheat them out of their cash. Not all of Rob's victims were vulnerable women, however. In one case, he befriended a jeweler in Sheffield and convinced the man that he was being recruited for a secret mission. However, this case was a bit different than most of Rob's other crimes, since he didn't seem to steal or defraud any money from Simon Young. Instead, he developed a series of increasingly bizarre tests for Simon to complete in the area. For starters, he specified where his victims should travel, including the bus routes, staircases, and even doors he should use during his daily activities. A few of the humiliating missions Rob convinced Simon to complete involved reading a sexually explicit publication while riding on the train and delivering a can opener to a bartender at a local bar. Although these and other related tests had no real purpose and were apparently just an effort to embarrass his supposed friend, Rob told Simon that it was all part of a much larger plan still in progress. After cutting ties with Simon, Rob moved on to another victim. He hired Elizabeth Bartholomew to provide childcare in 1996, and they were soon involved in a romantic relationship. That relationship devolved into degrading and abusive acts after Rob convinced Elizabeth that she had been placed on an IRA hit list. To test her loyalty and guarantee her safety, Rob instructed Elizabeth to perform acts that he said had been dictated explicitly by his bosses in the secret agency. He coerced her into a series of public stunts, including dressing up in ornate traditional Indian garments or pretending to be a Jehovah's Witness. He also instructed her to fundamentally change how she looked and presented herself to others. Finally, Rob exerted his influence over Elizabeth to the point that she agreed to change her name. Although he never admitted what he got out of pulling his victims' strings to the point that they agreed to degrade and embarrass themselves in public, it seems as if he was acting on a deep-seated desire from his youth. While frequently moving around as a child, it was almost impossible for Rob to form long-lasting relationships with schoolmates. To create any lasting impressions on those around him, he felt as if he had to plan and execute increasingly alarming stunts and pranks that would get a rise out of his chums while embarrassing his victims. As he grew older, his desire to be noticed never fully subsided. In fact, it grew even more pronounced, as did his ability to develop bizarre and humiliating hoaxes to watch those around him jump through hoops. Along the way, he built up a convincing persona that helped him bridge the gap between a relatively harmless prankster and a cruel con man. Not satisfied with merely embarrassing his victims, Rob became increasingly motivated by a desire to get rich through his elaborate schemes. Years after he met John and Sarah at the British pub and convinced them that he was a member of MI5, his bigger plan fell into place. Throughout the late 1990s, he acted on a scheme to extort his victims out of hundreds of thousands of pounds. Specifically, he convinced John to embark on a top-secret mission and successfully extorted more than 300,000 pounds from his family. Similarly, he hatched a scheme that allowed him to scam Sarah and her family out of another 200,000 pounds. During this period, he also convinced Maria to marry him, adding her surname Hendy to his name, officially becoming Robert Hendy Freegard. He used coercion and threats to keep the force intact, but he continued to look for other victims throughout the same period. One notable example was Leslie Gardner. He met the woman at a nightclub and told her he worked for a nuclear fuel company. Using this lie as the basis for his long con, he stole another 16,000 pounds from her. A con man tactic he used to defraud his victims involved forcing them to get odd jobs and hand over their earnings to him. He convinced them that he needed money to continue offering secretive protection against the evil doers intent on causing them harm. Even as his wife and 2 children faced eviction and abject poverty, Rob continued living the high life. He initiated relationships with several other women and used variations of his familiar scheme to extort a massive amount of money from multiple new victims. Rob seemed to be pursuing a fantasy life akin to a James Bond thriller, but he clearly lacked all the positive traits that 007 brought to the table. Instead, he focused solely on the character's negative characteristics, lies, and womanizing to carry out his criminally abusive plans. Authorities launched a wide-ranging investigation that spanned more than a year and a half and cost roughly £2.5 million. In the end, various agencies pieced together an intricate tale that Rob used to con different individuals out of their money. It took a while for investigators to determine the extent of a decade-long scheme. But it all seemed worth it when prosecutors developed a case against him with a host of criminal charges, including 2 counts of kidnapping, 8 counts of criminal deception, and 10 counts of theft. In total, law enforcement officers found that he directly extorted money from at least 8 victims, 7 women and 1 man. The counts against him were enough to land him behind bars for the rest of his life upon conviction. One of those victims was Kim Adams, who became his fiancée in 2002 and lost roughly £22,000. After realizing her mistake a bit too late, she refused to remain a helpless victim and staged a scheme of her own that helped bring Rob to justice. Thanks largely to Kim's testimony during the trial, a court found Rob guilty in 2005 and sentenced him to life in prison. Kim helped authorities track down a laundry list of incriminating evidence, including a stockpile of passports belonging to women who were previously reported missing. The investigation was enough to convince prosecutors that the case should go to trial, and even most of his lawyers seemed uninterested in trying to defend his actions. 3 of 4 defense attorneys who initially accepted a job working on the case reconsidered. They resigned due to what they described as a professional embarrassment. The evidence presented in court was enough to score a conviction, but any victory for his victims would be short-lived. A few years later, he appealed his kidnapping charges by arguing that his victims were never physically prevented from leaving him. Although he was obviously using threats and fear tactics to keep them captive, the judge ruled in his favor and granted his appeal, meaning he was released from prison in 2009. As expected, Rob returned to his familiar ways after regaining his freedom. He soon met Sandra Clifton and embarked on a whirlwind romance with the single mother. After moving in with Sandra and her 2 children in 2012, Rob began exerting his influence over the household, and the kids suspected that he was bad news. Less than 2 years later, he convinced Sandra to leave her family to live a secretive life with him. Her ex-husband and the father of her children investigated the situation and discovered that Rob, who was now introducing himself as David, had driven Sandra into financial ruin. Before long, the family learned about Rob's criminal past. Sandra's son, now in his mid-20s, hasn't seen his mother since he was a teen. He's gone public with his effort to convince Sandra to leave the man who destroyed their family. He's gone on multiple television programs to plead his case and assert that Rob is using his power of persuasion to brainwash his mother. It's unclear what lies he's using to keep his latest victim captive, but there's no doubt that his web continues to leave broken relationships and shattered dreams wherever he goes. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you'd rather have happen. Be gifted $1 million house or be gifted $500,000 in cash.